Translate.
So yes, Chap, I have seen Elvis, the 2022 biopic directed by Baz Luhrmann. I have to admit, I wasn't really interested in seeing this movie. Not that I had an overt dislike for Elvis. I've actually, even though I'm ignorant when it comes to many aspects of music, I have heard his songs. I've heard covers of his song, whether it be, Jailhouse Rock or Viva Las Vegas, all those things, chat. Thank you very much. Like all that. There's we've all heard Elvis's works through cultural osmosis and the decades. Since he was alive, his reputation has gone back and forth among all sorts of people. People have obviously criticized him, and people have, held up his legend, said like, no, he's one of the greatest rock stars. But at the same time, people have said like, but he walked he climbed upon the backs of other people who were innovative, and they didn't get enough credit because of, obviously, different, sociopolitical things that are going on at the time, Chad. So it's like, but what about this movie? Like, okay, that's a lot. It's certainly a famous legacy, an infamous legacy. How are you going to adapt it? What are you going to do? And Baz Luhrmann came in and said, I'm going to do it my way. He's going to do it the Baz Luhrmann way, chat, which is crazy and over the top, filled with colors, filled with very over-exaggerated performances, among other things. And so, I was also a little skeptical, to be honest. I have not been the biggest Baz Luhrmann fan the last few years. Like, I liked his Romeo and Juliet, adaptation. I liked Moulin Rouge. I was not the biggest fan. I mean, I outright just really disliked Australia. Thought that thing was just overly long and bloated and goofy. And I really didn't care for The Great Gatsby, although to begin with, I'm not a Great Gatsby fan. The original film of Robert Redford's not the great. I even really like the book all that much, so it's like, whatever. But, with this movie, like, okay, maybe he's going to simplify it. Let's just make it a straight biopic. And that's the other thing, too. I'm not even a big biopic fan for various reasons, Even though, like, I think the performances, like, in that movie might be fun or, very good. What so often happens in a lot of biopics, chat, is that you have the filmmakers and the writers, and they want to only focus on certain aspects of the person's history, only certain aspects of the personality. Most of the time, it's all the positive stuff. And, some of the, more infamous things and the negative things they're not focused on. Like, a great example, chat, was King Richard, which came out last year with Will Smith as Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena Williams, the famous tennis players. And I liked the movie. I enjoyed it. On DT Scott, I think I gave it a matinee. I think Will Smith gave a great performance. I think the supporting actors did a very good job too. It's just, but one of the things that I was reading up on the history is like, wow, they left out a lot of infamous things about this guy and how he had a whole other family, and they only kind of brought up briefly, and they just kind of glazed over all that, ignored all that, and how he pretty much abandoned them. It's like, that's something that should be covered, I feel like, But again, so often the filmmakers, they don't want to leave the audience, unless it's intended in the first place, yeah. They don't want to leave a negative impression of their main character. They'll show the trials and tribulations and things like that, but they don't want to make him look like an asshole. At least not consistently throughout the entire film, unless that is the point, unless that is their intention. Is that the intention of Baz Luhrmann? Chat? Well, kind of give you a brief background of the premise. Initially starts in 97, where it's following Elvis Presley's kind of long forgotten manager of Colonel Tom Parker, played by a hobgoblin, or Tom Hanks. And he's on his deathbed, and he's looking back on how he first met the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. And he pretty much goes on about Elvis's life from his childhood all the way up until his death from prescription medication. And so I'm kind of like, okay, that's a good beginning, in my opinion. And, watching the movie, one of the things I really liked about it, started out positively, Chad, really positively. I enjoyed that this film is just a cautionary tale about, I think, like three things, really. It's a cautionary tale about fame, freedom, and a lack of education. and how all three of those things can lead to someone like Elvis. This person who wants to play music, wants to be known as a musician, wants to become famous, but is unaware of the effects of that. Freedom, wants to do his own thing, but is unable to, and needs a manager, needs people around him to help him do that. But that comes with a lack of freedom. That freedom is taken away because of the managerial structure that's put in place, and also lack of education. Now, I wouldn't say like Elvis, like he's stupid, but he, as we all know, he famously did not have a lot of education. I mean, what did he even graduate high school? And that affected him. And it affected the choices that he made and the people he trusts. He was ignorant, sure. I think that's a good way to put it. And that's what this whole movie feels like to me. It's a cautionary tale. It's like, yeah, let's look at this guy, look at his career and his impact and what he did. But also, like, yeah, don't become someone like Elvis, because this is kind of the result of it. This is what could potentially happen to people with talent and people who can be taken advantage of by less than scrupulous individuals like the hobgoblin that is Tom Hanks in this movie. That's what that is. One thing, I mean, it's right at the forefront, chat. Within the first couple of minutes of this movie, Baz Luhrmann's style is on full display in all the best ways and all the worst ways, in my opinion. I mean, this is very much, this is obviously a Baz Luhrmann movie. I mean, from its production values to its use of music, its blending of music, and I can see how it's similar to Elvis and his performances himself, which are very outlandish. Elvis was all about the production, his various stage shows, especially in Vegas, and that's there, and those are pretty cool. It's just Baz Luhrmann has a thing where he likes to use modern music in a lot of his like period piece movies, and that just doesn't sit right with me. It reminds me of what he did with The Great Gatsby in particular, where he likes to use like modern music, a lot of hip hop, a lot of R&B, like mixed in with the film. And I'm sorry, but that just really takes me out. It just doesn't fit. Like, you have people like Eminem in here, you have Doja Cat, and I'm just like, this just doesn't fit at all. This clashes with, now I know that Baz Luhrmann loves that kind of clash of different time periods and cultures and aesthetics and sensibilities in music, but I just don't like that. I don't know why you just rely on Elvis's music. Just do that. Or other musicians that were of the time and their music mixed with his, because there are other musicians in this movie, which I do want to talk about, because I actually like some of the performances. But that was like, every time that happened, I was like, this is not working. Even my audience did not care for those scenes. it just didn't work for me. Another thing I wanted to bring up. Now, I don't know of how accurate this is to the actual man, but they do acknowledge throughout the film that black artists had on Elvis, how influential they were on him, and he acknowledges them. And they use like major historical events for that, the assassination of Martin Luther King, and they talk about people like Little Richard, and there's B.B. King, obviously. I actually like the actor who played B.B. King. I think he did a really good job. There's a great scene with him in the movie that really kind of brings up that criticism that is used against that is the criticism that is brought against Elvis a lot. And again, I don't know if that's how Elvis actually thought. I know that he has acknowledged in the past, the influence of black artists, but to what degree? I don't know if he consistently did that or he did that late in his career, but that is something that he has been criticized for quite some time. Before I get into any of the characters, I did want to acknowledge some stuff that I just feel like is egregious in this movie. So I kind of already talked about the cultural aspects where they do bring up the black artists that influenced him. You do have the kind of the crashing of styles of modern and the more kind of 1950s, 60s, and 70s aesthetics, and I don't think it always works. But the things that I feel like are really negative about this movie that just don't work for me at all, they completely gloss over the romance he has with Priscilla Presley. So famously, chat, Elvis met her when he was in the military. He was a 24-year-old man, stationed in Germany, and she was 14 fucking years old. They don't bring that shit up at all. They don't want to acknowledge that. When I'm like, come on. This is one of the things I'm talking about. That's similar to so many other biopics, or it's even similar to something like in King Richard's. Like, this is kind of a nasty piece of history with them, and they really don't cover that. You know, they kind of glorify it. I'm just like, yeah, this ain't gonna fucking fly. That did not work with me at all. Also, the film's sense of time is weird because you're basically covering so many aspects of Elvis's life. I mean, not only when he first started out in the 50s and in the 60s and in the 70s, of course, by the time he passed away, but you're also going way back to his childhood. And the movie has, and one, they don't really acknowledge the time jump. And sometimes you're like, oh shit, okay, we're going from here, and now he's extraordinarily wealthy. It's like, okay, like there's just, I don't think Baz Luhrmann does a good job of that. He's not really focused on the sense of time. It also doesn't help that the movie has a non-linear structure. And its jumbled nature makes it a little frustrating to watch because we're going back in the past and the future and then back again. And I'm like, I need a sense of continuity. And I know that's part of the chaotic style of Baz Luhrmann, but for me, it's just frustrating to watch. Now, the thing I really want to say that I feel like definitely works in this film, that across the board, I think everyone else is saying, Austin Butler, who I'm outside of his role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I didn't really know what else he did. He plays one of the Manson cultists who breaks in at the end of the film, who they break into Leonardo DiCaprio's home and they end up fighting Brad Pitt. He plays the character of Tex in that film. I actually like him quite a bit in the movie. I thought he did a good job. Here as Elvis Presley, he does an amazing job. I feel like you always run the risk when you have a guy doing Elvis, that it's going to just feel like an impression. It's going to sound like this. It'd be like me trying to do an Elvis impression. It doesn't sound like that for him. His whole thing, he doesn't sound like he's doing an impression of Elvis because it's subtle, it's laid back. Also, he doesn't do all the songs, but he does do a number of the songs in the movie, and he sounds fucking great. And it's crazy because when you put them side by side, it's like, oh, they really don't look like each other, really. I mean, there's some similarities, but, it's like, oh, no, he doesn't look like Elvis. But I think he does a good job. I think because he was so slow with the performance, that's not so overt. Or when it is overt, it's when he's doing the stage stuff, when he's doing the production stuff, when he's singing. But when he's just talking to people, he's more laid back, and he feels like a real person. Like, surprisingly, he's one of the most grounded characters in the movie, and you just end up really liking him. I mean, he has that charisma. He has that naivete. I just liked him in some of those smaller scenes. He can sell the big persona of Elvis, but he can also show us Elvis the man, and I thought he did a really good job. That's the thing I think everyone's going to come out of this movie saying. Mixed bag, sure, in a lot of regards, especially when it comes to production. I mean, in some cases, some of the music, some of the weird cultural things, everything with his wife, and, whether you give enough credit to black artists. But I think the one thing people are going to come out of this movie and say is that he did a great job just playing the role of Elvis Presley. I mean, he fucking nailed it. He's, I would not be surprised if he'll be up for a numerous awards chat, and, he deserves those nominations, in my opinion. Moving on from that, you have some other actors I want to get to, like Olivia. I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly. Olivia DeJonge plays Priscilla Presley. I think she's good. I think she's good in the movie. Again, it's a weird thing because they just don't acknowledge how fucking weird that relationship is, and so I just found that really distracting throughout the entire film. But other people I did like, I don't think everyone's talking about. Kelvin Harrison Jr. who plays B.B. King. They have some great moments in the film. I really like Elvis's relationship with B.B. King. I thought that was really fun. There's a great scene in the movie where, and it's not so much of a spoiler, but they're talking about Little Richard. They're watching Little Richard perform, and Elvis is talking about he wants to do Tutti Frutti, which Little Richard is famous for doing, the Tutti Frutti, all that. And B.B. King's like, you can do that, but no one's ever going to listen to his Tutti Frutti. And it's one of those moments in the film where Elvis acknowledged, like, he's realizes, like, oh shit, if I do it, I can get away with it, but he'll be forgotten. And that was cool. And we also see that with Willie Mae Big Mama Horton, who famously, did You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog and all that. And that's played by Ashanka Dakura. I think that's how you say her name. She's very good. She's great. A lot of supporting cast I think does a good job, but there is one person in this movie who I'm just like, they just don't fit. They feel like a creature, chat. They feel like a creature in a Lord of the Rings film. I'm sorry, but Tom Hanks as Colonel Tom Parker in the film is absolutely ridiculous. I think Tom Hanks is a great actor, but as I always say, you can be the greatest actor in the world. However, if you get a shit script, or if you get, in this case, I feel like shit direction, or maybe just carte blanche to do whatever the hell you want. In this case, this is one of his, I think, worst performances of his career. I think he's fucking ridiculous in this movie. He's a hobgoblin. I mean, he sounds like Elvis. I wish to represent you. And I get it. He was the real life guy was a piece of shit and was manipulative. And I like the idea that this guy had his thumb on Elvis the whole time because Elvis was too ignorant and too uneducated to realize like who this person really was, even if he fucking hates him because of his situation, before the situation he got himself and he had to rely on him. It's like, that's cool. That's interesting. It's just the way Tom Hanks is playing. Like, okay, I went back because I've looked at like archive footage of the real Colonel Tom Parker, who was like a Dutch immigrant. Who wanted to be pretend to be a Southern gentleman so he can con all these people in America, make himself more appealing. He did not sound like the way Tom Hanks sounds in this movie. And his accent is saying he still sounds like this throughout the movie. It's like, no, it doesn't work. They have him in so much makeup, which is weird because I think the prosthetics they use on Elvis later on in the film, as he gets older, it looks really good on Austin Butler. But with Tom Hanks, I'm like, he's wearing a fucking... He's wearing a fat suit. You could just tell he's like nothing feels real about him. He looks like he's made of rubber and plastic. So it was just it was ridiculous. I don't know if it was a miscasting. Just the how it was played. It did not work. I mean, you hate the guy because he's such a piece of shit in the movie, and he really does think that he's the hero of Elvis's story. He presents himself as like, I had to do the things that all managers had to do to make him the king of rock and roll. It was me, and I feel like you could have done that, but you gotta fucking lower it. You gotta lower it. Like, yes, the thing about it is, when you compare Austin Butler's performance with Tom Hanks' performance, Austin Butler can play it big when he's doing the songs and stuff, when he's on stage. He sells that. But the other thing, like I said to you, I love the subtlety of his performance when he's not on stage, when he's having a conversation with B.B. King. That's really good. I think it works really well, right? But Tom Hanks, he's at a fucking 11 throughout the entire movie, whether he's on stage or not. He's just that way. He's like Peter Lorre mixed with a fat bastard from Austin Powers and a hobgoblin. That's what he is. It's like if you combine Schmeagol from Lord of the Rings, if you combine those four things, you would get Tom Hanks as Colonel Tom Parker in Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. It just does not work. Yeah, he just needs a sign. Like, I mean, and again, you're like, Elvis, come on, man. I know you're not, I know, you're a little naive, you're a little ignorant, but just look at this guy. He's got villain written all over him. Everything from the accent to the suits he wears, what he's saying. He's just very manipulative. It's funny because I feel like this movie's going to get nominated for, a number of Academy Awards, particularly for Austin Butler. He's the best thing about it. I almost wish that a different filmmaker made this movie. I mean, some aspects of it were all the production stuff, like when we're on the stage and it's Elvis and he's doing his thing. I think that all works really well. And they intercut it with all the modern hip hop and R&B. And I'm just like, I just don't know. It almost felt like, to me, I don't know if you, let me know. It almost felt like Baz Luhrmann's like, well, there's a lot of criticism against Elvis that he never acknowledged, he wasn't very respectful towards the various black artists that influenced him. So I'm going to put in a lot of music that features, a black artist, even though Eminem is not black, which is weird to me. Maybe he doesn't know that. And I was like, yeah, it comes across awkward. Chat. But like all other biopics, that's the thing. it suffers from all the same problems that you're so used to seeing, even though it has like a great performances. It's great performances that I feel like are at times not even underserved by the material. Like, I feel like people like Austin Butler or like Kelvin Harrison Jr. play B.B. King. I feel like they elevate the material. They make it better. I feel like it could have been, had this not been given to Austin Butler, you had someone else play this role. Hey, like, you know what this makes me think of? Where a movie that I'm like, this just doesn't work and it just feels like a cartoon. There was that movie from a few years ago. And it's a few years ago because it was with Michael Shannon and Kevin Spacey. And it was Elvis. I think it was Elvis Meets Nixon, where Michael Shannon played Elvis and Kevin Spacey played Nixon. And that whole movie just feels like a cartoon. It felt like Michael Shannon was doing an Elvis impression. And I felt like that could have happened with this movie. You could have had someone who was just as ridiculous as Tom Hanks, as Tom Parker in this movie, chat. And thankfully, that's not that. There are some more subtle performances. They're able to go back and forth between being, the more outlandish, bombastic personality you see on stage, but also the more subtle things we see when they're not on the stage and not doing the things. It's just Tom Hanks just didn't know that. Or Baz Luhrmann said, you need to be over the top constantly. And in regards to Tom Hanks, it didn't work. With Austin Butler, thankfully, there was a nice balance. And with, a lot of the other supporting cast, I think it was a nice balance, and they did a great job. They did a great job, But again, it's still servicing the same problems that affect so many other biopics. The choice not to cover certain topics that are uncomfortable, like especially, I feel like, again, I don't know to what degree Elvis was acknowledging the influence of black artists, but they covered that in this movie. They covered that more than I thought they would, which was nice. They completely glossed over the whole Priscilla Presley thing, which I thought, like, that's come on. You got to cut. They just didn't do it. They just didn't. They chose. They're like, we're not going to touch that. And I'm like, that's too bad. That could have been interesting. And it suffers from some of the same things that Baz Luhrmann typically does. His mixture of the classic with modern and they crash into that. He clearly likes that though. That's clearly an aesthetic thing. And if you like that with Baz Luhrmann, you're gonna get it. You're gonna get that. I just don't like that. And his sense of time is very weird. His sense of time and how we're jumping around, I think that can be a little confusing and frustrating for you. You'll probably know because of the way the clothes change and how fat Elvis is. But, at the end of the day, I think it was an entertaining watch. Oh, and also, the other thing I forgot to say, way too long. This movie is 2 hours and 45 fucking minutes. It does not need to be 2 hours and 45 minutes, Chad. It's way too long. You could have cut like 25, maybe a half hour out of this movie. You would have been better for it. There's just too much fat, literal too much fat on the film, Chad. Like maybe 2 hours and 10 minutes. You feel that runtime because there's a lot of downtime. And it's just a lot of that. So much of Baz Luhrmann's style can come across obnoxious, and it just feels like he's just stuffing you constantly. It's like, no more, stop doing that. It's like, stop feeding me, Baz Luhrmann, stop it. It's way too much. Okay, I need a palate cleanser. So yeah, it's overindulgent. It's very overindulgent, chat. So, but at the same time, there's things about it that I think are very, very good. Particularly Austin Butler, particularly when he does the performances both on stage and obviously off the stage. I think he's great. He's gonna be the one everyone's gonna say, yeah, he deserves a lot of the credit. It's a mixed bag though. It's a mixed bag. If I were to give this a rating on the double toasted scale, man. Because there's some stuff when you see in the theater, it's pretty spectacular. It's pretty cool to see. It's like, maybe it's like a low matinee, like a really low matinee, but like a very high rental. That's where I'm kind of stuck right now, Chad. I think if you're a Baz Luhrmann fan, then you're going to love it, most likely. Then you'll want to see it in the theater, so it's kind of like a low matinee. But if you're not, then I'm like, high rental. That's what I would give it, Chad. I think this movie is better than The Great Gatsby or Australia. It's a more of a return to form. I wouldn't say it's Moulin Rouge or even Romeo and Juliet, but it's, not as bad as those last two movies. It doesn't reach the depths of those movies in my opinion, but it's entertaining enough. So I would give it it's a high rental, chap. high rental for me, but it might be a matinee for you, and I can totally understand why. I can totally understand why. They show him die in the toilet taking a dookie. Just shat himself to death. Just feces, I mean, when he landed on the toilet chat in the movie, I'm going to tell you this right now. When they got him to the bathroom, he didn't even pull his pants down. It just ripped. His asshole just ripped a giant, big fucking hole right through those pants. All those prescription pills, all those peanut butter, bacon, banana sandwiches, chat, all the way too many cards, just violently shat himself to death in the movie, chat. It was, oh my God. Oh my Lord. If you're gonna go with the movie, I will say you gotta stick around for the ending, chat, because I was like, are they gonna do it? And they literally show him just shit himself to death. I was very impressed. I was like, they did not ignore that aspect of his demise. I was like, you know what? Good for you, Baz Luhrmann. He did it in the Baz Luhrmann way, to hip hop and Jailhouse Rock mixed in there, chat. Just imagine like a really long fart mixed in with all that. That's what you got. It's a post-credit scene. Yeah, it's a post-credit scene.